It's 6 o'clock in London, it's 1 p.m. in New York, 1 a.m. in Hong Kong, 3 a.m. in Sydney, 10 a.m. in San Francisco, and 10:30 at night in Mumbai. Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Patrick L. Young, the IPO-VID livestream Series 11, Episode 2. That makes for a grand total of 62 shows, ladies and gentlemen. Start here. Delighted to see them in the news this week from many of the other stories that you could have read in Exchange Invest, the Bourse Business Weekly, that the Qatar Stock Exchange have announced a replacement for their trading system. They're going to be getting rid of their older Euronext software and replacing it with the wondrous technology of the London Stock Exchange Group. Marked a good day, of course, for Peter Jessup, the man in charge of the LSEG's sales team and the overall development of their exchange software PAL for customers, as he was also confirmed as a director of the New Zealand Stock Exchange on the same day. Congratulations all round there. Meanwhile, we've got a bit of a worry in the United States of America. You may remember your history, onion futures, the only futures previously banned in the United States of America. Well, it could be happening again. There is a coalition of the progressive wing of the current government and the Democrats in the USA, and they're trying to ban water futures. Frankly, ladies and gentlemen, that worries me. This strikes me as being a little bit like the Valley of the Mad. Of course, yes, we know that there have been crazy people in the White House of late, but the current idea amongst a certain fringe of the Democrat Party that ultimately water is not something that a transparent and openly priced resource strikes us as being a very, very dangerous concept. What do you put in your water? Well, of course, lemon. So way to go, Lemon Markets. They've raised 15 million euros in a funding round co-led by Lakestar and Lightspeed. Congratulations, founders Marius Sprenger and Max Linden. Meanwhile, we've also had a market mystery this week. Great read, actually. It's in the New York Times, a market mystery, the wheat whale that came out of nowhere. Very, very much worth reading, as people blame, amongst others, Reddit users for the wheat whale mystery that came out of nowhere. Finally, this week, a few upheavals at the CME. We'll probably be talking about more of those indeed in our next show in a couple of weeks' time. First of all, let me say, actually, somebody that's just been announced today, congratulations to William Naughton-Belt. I wish you a fabulous retirement. You've had an incredible impact on CME over the years. And equally, we want to congratulate former NASDAQ EMEA Head of Sales and Account Management, Nick Wallace, on your new role as Aventus MD. All this and more has already been covered in greater detail in Exchange Invest Daily, the unique newsletter of the Bourse Business. Send us an email or hit me up, Patrick L. Young, on social media via whatever stream you're watching this, and we can get you signed up to understand the exchange business. Now, today we have a super exciting show. PLY, Patrick L. Young, is going to meet Patrick Young. None other than Patrick M. Young, I do believe, is the absolutely precise middle initial for this man. Patrick Young is on a mission to improve financial literacy. And no, that's not me, but we're in heated agreement on that one. The more financially literate we are, the better this world will be. Welcome to my namesake with similar aims. Patrick is director for the New Orleans Mayor's Office of Gun Violence Protection. The OGVP is the backbone of the city's efforts to work with New Orleanians to prevent gun violence and create peace. Prior to working with the mayor, Patrick served the New Orleans Business Alliance's Director of Training, managing the Strive Work Readiness Training Program. Operating across 4 opportunity centers in the city of New Orleans, Patrick helped employ over 890 formerly incarcerated persons in less than 3 years. As founder and executive director of SharpMen, Patrick helped men overcome barriers to employment and was selected as a WK Kellogg Foundation Fellow for his proven leadership and dedication to improving the city of New Orleans. And now, and we're going to get on to talking about that in just a few minutes, Patrick is the author of his first book, A Way Up: Economic Development Post-Incarceration, a strategy toolkit for investors. A strategy toolkit for individuals with barriers in financial literacy and access to resources because of a conviction. Patrick L. Young, meet Patrick M. Young. Patrick, good evening. Welcome to the show. Good afternoon, of course, because we're in Eastern Standard Time here. Where in the world are you today?
I'm coming live from New Orleans, where we say "Who dat?" So
Who
it's Patrick M. Young, and I'm excited to be here.
Patrick, it's so good to see you on this show. Let me just give a little bit of background. I have, because clearly I'm a rapacious, egotistical individual, a Google alert on my name, and that throws out various different people who are called Patrick Young at different points in time. And that's where I first got to hear about you and your mission. And in fact, the first thing I was aware about you with was in relation to SharpMen. Now, I have to say, if I may, I think you're looking very, very sharp today, Patrick. That's a wonderful suit altogether. Tell me, how did you manage to get to this position and create SharpMen?
So first, the idea was I was doing work readiness training, helping people get employed. But when it was time for an interview, women would go to Dress for Success, which provides attire for women. But in New Orleans, we didn't have any place where men could go to get the proper attire for interviews. And so when I actually looked across the country, there aren't really any resources for men who are looking for employment opportunities where they can get professional attire. So I just wanted to launch a nonprofit that really can help, because I was running out of suits and ties. Everyone was raiding my closet. So I found it helpful. And in the first few years, we were able to help over 700 men get properly fitted for attire. Our juvenile justice system, where kids were arrested for crimes, we provided suits to all those young individuals. So when they're released, they go home with a different attire. Hopefully we can change that attitude. And so hopefully I'll be able to expand to other markets and other cities. It's new, but everywhere you see a Dress for Success for women, I hope to put a SharpMen.
That's a fantastic message altogether. I must admit, I was not aware of Dress for Success and what it had brought as its mission, but that's a super idea. So also, obviously, you bring people in, you try to help them dress, you try to help them presumably prepare for the whole process of trying to get a job, going to interview, etc.
Yes, I mean, the hardest part of the process, I mean, you may have a desire to work, but there's that panic about the interview, like what to say and how to present my resume. The last thing that you should be concerned with is what you look like and how you present. And so the same way that an athlete puts on their uniform, we want you to put on the uniform to compete for this job and opportunity. And so we want to make sure that you look sharp, think sharp, and stay sharp. And for men, iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. So most of the stuff that we receive are donations from other men who just want to clean out their closet or really give a legacy to give back. The power in just giving a tie to someone else can really shift that person's trajectory. So we're excited about it. It's growing. We had a little downturn because of COVID, but hopefully we'll be back up and running. I do an annual bourbons and bow tie brunch. So I would like to see you one day come to our brunch where every man has to wear a bow tie. We have a nice brunch, but it's a day where we give back to the entire city.
What a great idea. I think we can call that a date. Send me an invitation. I'll be there. I'll bring my best bow tie, and I'll be delighted to manage to drink one or two bourbons as well. It sounds like the perfect thing to have when you're in New Orleans. That sounds quite incredible altogether, Patrick. Thank you. Let me just say hello at this point in time. We've got a multiplicity of our regular viewers are all here. Whether you're a regular viewer or whether this is your first time, ladies and gentlemen, don't be shy. Send us a little love, send us a message, make a comment, ask a question. We'll be delighted to hear from you this evening. All are welcome all the time on IPO-VID live stream. Hello, John T. Good evening, Patrick and all. Hey, John T., it's great to hear from you. Really, really delighted to see you. Ian Miller, good evening, Patricks. Looking forward to this week's IPO-VID. I am too, actually. I think this is such a great topic ahead of the Easter weekend. It's lovely to hear from you, Ian, all together. Hello, Peter Second. Evening, Patrick and Patrick. Well, good evening, Peter. And hello to Ari as well. I hope you're on the sofa beside your dad this evening. What are you now? Nearly a month old, Ari. You must be getting quite experienced. This is at least your third IPO you're watching. And indeed, Peter goes on to note 2 for the price of 1. You got it there. You probably having difficulty even discerning the difference between the two of us. I think Patrick's looking by far the smarter this evening. Certainly, he's looking very dapper altogether. It's quite wonderful. And Simon Huckle. Simon, good to see you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening to you too, Simon. It's really, really lovely to see you there. We've got Marcus Ward. Good evening. Looking forward to tonight's IPO-VID with Patrick L. Young, the Patrick Young. Well, I think it's Patrick L. Young and Patrick Young, but I get the sentiment absolutely, Marcus. We're delighted to be here in this conversation. And woman on it, yo, ladies, it's good to see you. OMG, PLY and PMY. I'd love to see coordinated YMCA dance one day. Well, I think probably after the Bowtie and Bourbon brunch, you might get a chance to see that woman on it. I think that's quite feasible that we'll get to that at some point in time. Lots of hearts from Marcus. Thank you so much, Marcus. I really, really appreciate that. And Messy Times, another tremendous show. On with it. Thank you very much, Chris Messina. Great to hear from you all together. Wow, thank you so much from so many comments from so many people. It's a delight to hear from you all. If you've got a question, ask Patrick. Okay, Patrick. Now, you've told us, you've explained to us how it is that you came to give back. You created SharpMen. I love the idea of staying sharp at all points in time. But obviously, I mean, if we're looking at this as the three reels of the movie, and we're in reel 3 at the moment, and we're really kicking everybody, we're doing well, we're going up and so on. The second reel was building your NGO. That first reel, it's not so good, is it? I mean, that was a bit of a challenging time in your life. Tell us a little bit about your backstory, please, and how you got to be here on your amazing story.
Yeah, sure. So I'm born and raised in New Orleans, and there are a lot of things that people love about New Orleans, and I feel like sometimes I'm the best and the worst of New Orleans, where we have the food, the culture, the music, and the live and entertainment. But New Orleans suffers in education. And it also has a lot of poverty, and it can be destructive. For me growing up, my mom was a single mom in the military. She raised 4 boys by herself. And right in college, my brother got murdered. It really changed my whole perspective on life, kind of gave up on myself, and would get in trouble following the wrong crowd. So right a year after my brother was murdered, I would receive a 65-year prison sentence for armed robbery. The judge offered me 65 years. That 65 years was broken down to 15. I served 13 years and 9 months in prison, Department of Corrections, released in 2012. And here today, 10 years later, now the first director of gun violence for the mayor's office in New Orleans. It's really just a blessing. It's really just the perseverance that you have to go through to really learn and reinvent yourself, and to really find out who you are and your identity. So a lot of stuff that we talk about, investing in whether it's bonds or stocks or crypto, it's the idea that you hope you'll have a better return. And so I had to take that same energy and put it into myself. So I really invested into myself, a lot of information, education, to where now this is just the payoff. This is the return on my investment.
Wow, that's quite a story. Certainly quite different to my childhood in Belfast and what went on there. And I think I was very lucky not to be involved in such things or happen. Incredible story for your mum. How does your mum view things these days?
Oh, she's loving it. I mean, she was, it's that hope and belief for any parent to see their kids do well. And when you're able to overcome challenges, I guess it's the thing that to see your child not give up, but to come back. The mistakes, the pain, the mental health, the depression that you feel on top of the societal pressures, to now come back, fight, and create another way, it leaves a better legacy. And I think that it's not just people who are incarcerated, but people that live in poverty all across the world feel stuck. And if you feel stuck, you just want a support system to pull you out of the mud and then show you that there's a way that you won't get stuck again, So she's loving it. She has a grandchild, my son, who she adores. And but it's just her belief in me that keeps me pushing, and I can push that belief into others.
That's awesome altogether. Good evening to Patrick's mum, or good afternoon to Patrick's mum. I'm still in European time, even though I've been in Eastern time for like the last 3 weeks. Good grief. Suffering from jet lag in my presentation. Hello to Patrick's mum. I mean, that's just such an incredible story, but also for your mum to lose a son on the way through her journey of parenthood after working so hard with the four of you. I mean, that's such a struggle. What, as a matter of interest, do your siblings get up to these days?
So my brother, he actually works. My oldest brother works in finance. My younger brother, he is into real estate and flipping properties. And so and then again, my other brother who was deceased. But it's all like, it's funny. We're in different parts of money matters. And so one works in finance and the other one works in those properties. We all have the discussion on what's the best way to make money. So we have interesting discussions for Thanksgiving.
Interesting questions. Yeah, the issues about money as you go forward, it's always quite amazing altogether. Wow, we've got a flurry. You're driving a huge amount of traffic here. Patrick L. Young has never managed to break the internet, but Patrick M. Young, after only 15 minutes of this show, you're on it. I'm telling you, you're going to break this show without a problem. I think we're already on the discussion. Chris Messina's asking us from Messy Times. Curious to hear Patrick's thoughts on the main challenges that ex-cons face in re-entering society in a positive way. And I think we'll have more discussion on that in just a second. Woman on it, great to hear you once again, Woman on it. Looking forward to your show tomorrow evening, which will be at midday Eastern time, 6 p.m. London time, 6 p.m. CET rather. Whoa, what an incredible life. Well done, PMY. Hack the future, as the ladies of Women on it always say. Marcus Ward, respect on becoming a better person. And that's I think a message which is coming out from everybody. John T is saying it's a great positive story and message altogether. So Patrick, Woman on it, they've asked you a question. What surprised you most in terms of technology upon your release? Because you were just telling us, 13 years and 9 months? Did I get that right? Wow, so, the world moved on quite a lot.
So social media, there was no social media. I was just, there were cell phones and we had beepers, but to come out and just to see the connection that you would have, like Facebook and then Instagram. So, and then even learning how to operate through the internet was in such a way, it was totally different. Having to go online to put in resumes, to fill out applications. So much stuff had moved into a digital realm in such a short period of time. That was the main thing. And I tell people, one of the things I teach now is that we update and upgrade our devices. So we should update and upgrade ourselves as well. 3 to 4 times a year, your phone will tell you update. And it's saying I have to make internal improvements so I can perform better. And then you upgrade because externally you need to look different. That's why Sharp, or whether you go from an iPhone to i10, the external looks different once you've made those internal changes. And then the lastly is how well are you performing against the competition? So iPhone wouldn't be as great without Samsung pushing it to be better. So for me, it's always, when we think about technology, and I teach people who are incarcerated now and about to be released, you need to update, upgrade so that you can perform and outperform your competition. The same way technology updates and upgrade, you should do it as well.
Wow, that's an absolutely fabulous answer to a terrific question. Thank you very much, Woman on it. And thank you, Patrick. I think that's a really, really interesting message for everybody, least of all the people who are incarcerated. But it must obviously be very challenging because presumably the flow of news and the ability to understand what's happening in the outside world is somewhat limited when you're in the penitentiary system.
It is, and it gets to the point of, well, what led the person to be incarcerated to begin with, and the struggles of being in poverty, the desperation of not having the understanding of financial literacy, of capitalism, and understanding good government, good money management. That exists here. And a lot of times not having that education is critical. And so when you're inside, where you don't have the access to maybe the technology, you do have access to reading and libraries where you can study just to get a better understanding of basic information around just even planning, organizing. and just exactly what you want to do with your money when you do get it.
Yeah, it's quite an incredible challenge altogether. And actually, we've got a great question from Peter Secon. What's your biggest learning experience you've taken with you to the outside world on your release?
Oh, it's a great question. To be yourself. I think a lot of times people have this identity crisis where, so for me, I looked up to my brother. I wanted to be my brother. But when he passed, I lost my identity in him losing his life. Even if you look at social media, so many people are drawn to, I want to look like this person. I want to be like this person. And the value is really being yourself, not trying to adopt to somebody else's expectation. Don't have to look like anybody else. You don't have to talk like anyone else. You can be you and use your gifts and your creativity and bring that to life. And so that was my biggest thing. Stop trying to follow the crowd. Stop trying to be accepted. Stop trying to let everybody see you or beg for attention. Just be who you are. And I think that's the phrase, this thine own. To thine own self be true, and it shall follow the days as the night. So you shall be false to no man.
That's a great maxim altogether. I'm reminded of actually Mrs. Young. She's got a fabulous short line that she loves, which is be yourself, everybody else is taken, which I think also neatly sums things up. And actually, I was watching a video the other week, Jeff Sprecher, the founder of the Intercontinental Exchange, and in that, he made a great comment about branding, whether it's corporate branding or personal branding, which is, if you don't define yourself, someone else will define you for you. And that's also a very, very powerful message in line with what you're talking about, Patrick. I mean, it's really intriguing altogether. So you've been out of jail now, therefore, for, if I got that correctly, 10 years, right? And that actually took place, what, a month or two ago was actually the 10th anniversary, if I'm right?
Right. Yeah.
So that, yep.
And so that led to, so I released my book on 2/22/22. If you add those two together, it means 10. It adds to 10. And so that 10 marks the release of, since I've been released from incarceration. It also acknowledges at 22 was the how old my brother was when he was murdered. And so for me, it's a lot of parallels, a lot of symbolism. The numbers never lie, but it's just time that twos also represent alignment, that we have to come into alignment with who we are and what's destined for us. And so when those things fall into alignment, you'll see other things that are not meant for you fall out of alignment because you're destined for prosperity. And so this isn't just my sayings or my ideas. This is God work. I believe that we are all called to a higher purpose. And so it's just believing in it and walking in it.
That's really, really inspiring altogether. And actually, that's the message from Peter Secon. Your journey and experiences are inspiring. We have a huge amount of social media and discussion traffic so far this evening. It's quite interesting. I mean, Christopher Messina, he's building on some of the topics we've been discussing earlier on about one of the challenges in relation to data capturing. Proper pre-trial data collection, analysis and reporting can help to build systems that meet local needs, save money, improve program practices and decrease jail crowding. And actually, I mean, that also brings to, for example, the social impact bond movement, which has been quite interesting in this whole area. Sorry, as ever, I have to nerd out on finance, Patrick. I'm sorry. But it becomes quite fascinating because you look at those sorts of different issues that come up and how the social impact bond movement is there to try and help. Has been, well, originally the Peterborough bond was there to try and stop people reoffending when they were going to jail in the UK. Women on it, according to the Washington Corrections Ward, the financial and emotional burdens of incarceration are primarily borne by female family members, most especially in communities of color. I mean, it's a very, very sanguine set of statistics. And clearly, I'm very interested. You've got a super positive ethos. I mean, you just step out of, listening to you today, you step out of as if it's morning in America and there's a huge opportunity. Now, I personally believe that, but I haven't had the life experiences that you've had. And I was not born in the area you were born in where, as you say, I mean, there are a lot of very, very disparate situations for people in the USA. How do you view trying to help lift all of those parties out of poverty, not just the people that are say caught up in the criminal justice system?
Um, it's the alchemist says when you strive to become better, everything around you becomes better as well. And actually, it's the tragedy of thinking that I couldn't help my brother to stop him from dying, from being murdered. And so, changing the conditions of myself, hopefully, I can change and make it better for all those around me. So it's a proving point to me and even to you. The work that you do to improve yourself, it is going to naturally help anybody else because you're striving to become better. The people on this call who may have family and kids that they send out to school every day, when their kids come back, they're excited to see their parents because their parents are working hard to make it better for them. And so it's kind of one of those things. As you give, it will come back to you, and I just believe in that. And so it's no magic formula other than um, as you pour into yourself, it's going to overflow into others.
I think that's a great message altogether. I mean, someone who was much more scientifically brilliant than I formulated it into a theory of karma, and I certainly think you're right. I think you will get back what you give out, and what you do to try and help people is going to make a big difference to life in general. Peter Second's got an interesting question here, Patrick, actually, because you mentioned the fact that obviously social media was the big change, the thing that didn't exist before you went into jail and then was pretty much omnipresent by the time you were released. How much of an influence is social media having on reform and changing behaviors and educating inmates?
It's twofold. I think it has a positive spin because you're able to give information out across the world. You can have access to policy reform. You can have discussions around inhumane conditions. But on the flip side, I think it's a negative thing because it exposes people to adopt different behaviors or identities that's not their own. And so in order for you to succeed, you have to look a certain way, do this a certain way, or become a pretentious character on these media platforms. So where it's good for education and policy, I think it's bad for personalities because you don't get to be your authentic self. I think it's good for you to sometimes disassociate yourself from media and find your own true being. And then if you have something that you want to promote, then promote it in your own uniqueness and likeness, not because you've seen this other person do it and you expect to get views or comments or likes. You shouldn't chase it that way. Recently, there was a movie, House of Gucci, and you saw even without social media, this person was chasing the approval of others instead of staying true to themselves. And so it's really important for you to stay true to your own self and not get lost in some of the media.
Staying true to yourself, not getting lost in the media. You're interesting. Your point's well made also in relation to the movie House of Gucci, because there they managed to get certain parties completely lost track of who they were and where they were. And that was in an era before social media itself happened. So you've had this great success. You've managed to come forward. You've become the first director of gun violence, helping the mayor of New Orleans. You created SharpMen. You're getting these guys into suits, making them better prepared. You've put 890 people into employment. That's a spectacular number by any stretch of the imagination. That's absolutely incredible. Now you've got the book. So you've become in some ways, great achievement for you. In another way, you're another Patrick Young who's written a book, I suppose one could say, if they're going to try and denigrate that. Just have to make a quip about that. Sorry. A Way Up, Economic Development Post-Incarceration by Patrick M. Young. It was published on 02/02/22. Tell us a little bit about how you came to write the book.
So it was so I always had this idea around why is it so hard for someone after incarceration to really make it? Like, what is the challenge? And we start with saying, oh, you need to get employed. So maybe we can help with employment. So that's where Sharp came from. But then after you get employed, if you wanted to buy your own home, if you wanted to get a car, if you wanted to go to the bank for any reason, you would get denied pretty much because of that conviction. So it was like almost a double standard. Even though you completed your sentence, you were still being held captive to the conviction. And so most people in prison in America are in prison because of poverty. And so I parallel prison and poverty and show that it's not about just getting out of prison. You have to get out of poverty. You have to find a way up, not just a way out. If economics is used to keep people incarcerated, that's why it's called the prison industrial complex. The economics is going to have to be used to move you out of that state of conditioning. And so what we're missing is access to resources and capital. So once you get released, you need access to banking, but there isn't a bank that says, hey, this is the first bank of people who are formerly incarcerated. You come here, you can open up a checking account, we can start your credit, and we can help you move your life back forward. That doesn't exist, but parallel it to the military. The military has a version here called TED, Transition Economic Development, which specifically helps veterans return back after they did their deployment. What's good is the best practice model is that they have access to USAA, Navy Federal, and all these banking resources. And so the outcomes is veterans lead the country with home ownership. There are a large pocket of people who have business ownership. There are large people who are investors because veterans have access to capital. If you want to rebuild the society and people who've made a mistake, why not give them access to capital to do it? And so the book deals with those subjects, economic development, post-incarceration, the things you need to know to one, if you do get money and get resources, what do you do with it? The financial education around managing that money. And then secondly, how are you setting your goals as far as moving, not just out of prison, not just out of poverty, but into a different wealth class that can build money for you and your family for generations.
It's really very interesting altogether. It's very interesting the way that you contrast and compare with the US military, who I agree have got an incredible system through their TED system in order to manage to help veterans make the transition back into society. And obviously, it's something that, for whatever reason, the prison industrial complex hasn't managed to get us around to yet with anybody who's been an offender. And I mean, I think that's quite fascinating. I'm interested because actually one of the things really struck me coming out of your book was how you talk about, the first thing you actually think about when you're in jail and what effectively drives all of your thinking is, when am I going to get out of jail? But actually, the date you get out of jail doesn't really equate to the day that you're actually at liberty, if I can paraphrase what you've said so eloquently in your book. And I mean, that raises two questions. I mean, first of all, we got one from Rombeat, rather. Hello, Rombeat. It's an incredible story. How do you stay positive while being in jail?
Well, it's honestly, it's challenging. And there's this story in the Bible where this young man who leaves his father, he finds himself in a pig pen. And he says, and when he came to himself. And so when he came to himself, he realized that, my dad's a king. I don't have to live like this. I thought I knew it all, but I didn't. And you have to just have that moment. And I think everybody comes to a moment, whether you're in jail or not, when you just come to yourself and look at your life and figure out, is this really where I want to be? And so you have to look at what actions it took for you to get in the situations, and you have to do the actions to get yourself out of it. It can be hard to stay positive in jail because you're surrounded by so much negativity. You're surrounded by so much misery. But again, it's in that noise that you have to silence all those critics and come to yourself and really redefine who you are. If you were being pretentious and fake and that got you incarcerated, they have a lot of people who use nicknames. They want to be killer, soldier, or whatever. They make up their name and they take on that avatar. But again, it's like, nah, who are you really? And then once you get to find out who you are and you believe in yourself, then you see some change happening. Because it doesn't matter if you're in jail and you having problems with who you are, your identity, you're gonna have those same problems outside of jail, and you'll be just as negative incarcerated or not. People who live a positive life have a positive sense of who they are.
That's a very powerful message, once again, in terms of the total positivity. Okay, so you go through the jail experiences. You're saying people are not prepared for coming out on the outside. Now, You've written this book. It's a lovely, interesting, Non-textbook, it's really approachable. It's a great punchy style, short paragraphs. I love it. It's very, very easy to understand. When you're reading that on the way through, what are the core things that someone needs to do who's either just come out of jail or indeed is just rethinking their life and is going to try and escape from that poverty trap?
It's as simple. It's a roadmap. Like right now, if anybody wants to travel, let's say I'm in New Orleans and I say I wanted to go to New York. If I put in my Google phone, give me the GPS from New Orleans to New York, it's going to give me different options, whether I want to walk, fly, drive, ride a bike. And it's also going to give me the destination. And it's also going to give me a time. When we're thinking about improving ourselves out of this incarcerated state into a state of wealth, it's the same process of GPSing your success, whether you want to walk it through, drive it through, fly it through, and how much time do you really have to invest into yourself? And then you actually have to get started. And so the book gives you a strategy map on how to move from one place to the other place. And you just follow those step by steps. It starts it's a basic read around literacy. So it was written really between the 7th and 8th grade level reading. So it's not really difficult to read or understand the concept, but it's really to push you to get started. Actually, the hardest part of it all with any economic development or investing, as you should know, there's so much hesitation in just doing it and taking the risk. And so jumping out and stepping out on faith and believing in yourself is going to be critical. But once you do, here's the map on how to move, out of your condition and up to a better way.
That's really interesting. And I have to say, I'm sorry, I have to have a juvenile joke here, but I mean, you've said it's written between 7th and 8th grade English. So therefore, most bond traders who are trading bonds for a living should be able to understand it, thankfully, which is very, very useful. But it's interesting. You've broken the things down very simply. You're giving the message of core thing. What sort of feedback have you had to the book so far?
So what took so long? So it's, when you really think we have over 77 million people in America who have a conviction, when we think about the poverty, when we think about the crime, especially crime. So crime is in poverty-stricken neighborhoods. The reason why there's so much poverty is because you don't have access to funding. If there's no access to funding, there's no access to ownership. And so the difference between an area that has high poverty and low poverty is the majority of the residents, do they own that space? And so when people don't own that space, it's devalued and it's not taken care of. It's not yours. And so you see a lot of garbage. You see a lot of spray painting. You see it's not valued in the same sense as if you own it. And so when you have all these folks returning again from incarceration and they don't have access to own stuff, you got to keep in mind the circle of influence and the family and friends who they live with. They're back in poverty. They don't own anything. They have kids who then they grow up in that poverty. They don't own anything. So you're building on just this deficit of depression. Mm-hmm. It has to come to a time where we figure out, okay, this is not working. We have to do something different. During the pandemic, I don't know about where you are, but the government passed out stimulus payments. If economics wasn't important, well, why would you try to pass out money to get people going? So during tough times, you recognize that people need finances and resources to restart their lives. But you're putting a ban on people who have made a mistake in their lives and not giving them access to resources. So it's an oxymoron in a sense. You're releasing someone with a brick tied behind their leg. In the same way during slavery, and I don't know if you knew this or not, but during slavery, the government paid restitutions to slave owners for losing their property. So they figured that I can invest into the slave owner for losing their property to help them recover. But the slaves who were released, they received nothing. And so in that example, you see there are some people who are receiving money and are succeeding, and some people don't. For us to build ourselves as one unit in one country, we have to make sure that everybody have access to those resources. It's a tragedy to see what's going on in Ukraine. But the main thing is that those people of that country are going to need access to resources.
Yep.
Hugs and kisses is not going to get it. They need places where they can rebuild themselves and their lives. And so in the same vein, let's remove the racial element. Let's just look at it from an economic point between the people that are wealthy and the people that are not wealthy. And the main thing is who has access to the resources. And so all I'm arguing for is that people who are returning from a conviction should have access to banking and investments just like everybody else.
I think that's a very well made point. And actually, I mean, you look at the whole history of slavery and you talk about the economics of that. And actually, that's a point that's been true in slavery going back all the way to ancient Rome and before. And it didn't matter what was the origins of the slaves. There's always been this perverted system where the slave owner could manage to be compensated, where the slaves were just left in a dreadful situation. And you're absolutely, I think, spot on with some very, very interesting points about access to capital, which is what is vitally important and something which a lot of people, and I think, to be fair, a lot of the people who would normally watch this show just somewhat take for granted. Now, I mean, we've got some fascinating comments coming up. I'm going to come to Peter second in just a moment. Thank you very much, John T. Here we are, Patrick Young, talking to Patrick Young, all about the interesting world of opportunity in which we live nowadays. Sounds like a fascinating and interesting topic. Just ordered the book on Amazon. You've got a sale, Patrick. That's a good start to the day. You're 40 minutes into the show and you're doing well. And I think equally, I mean, your message definitely rings a tone there, Peter. Second, repeating from your book, the first thought after any arrest is usually, how long will it take to get out? Eventually they slip into your life of crime and the cycle continues. So how do we stop that? Well, actually, I think you've already been outlining it very, very well, but give us some other thoughts on things that we can do in order to try and stop this cycle.
So if you travel abroad, like in some countries, if you're out and they'll say, look, don't feed the monkeys, right? And the monkeys will fly down, they'll steal fruit, they'll harass you. And it's not that the monkeys are just bad or anything, stuff like that. They're in desperate need of resources. They just want to be fed. They're hungry. So in the city that you're deprived from resources, you're deprived from opportunity, you're last in education, you come from a cycle of generational poverty. Pretty much, again, like the lady said earlier, the women are the burden bearers of all of this. Fathers are no longer there. There is a desperation that's happening, and people are just crying out for attention. But where is the need? And the need is for some economic stimulus support. Kids who, there's some parts of New Orleans that can look like a third world country. And it's just people who live without lights, without water. And it gets to a point to where it's balling up. And then social media doesn't help, again, because you see people live these lavish lifestyles, and it's perpetrated that, oh, if you look this way or do these things, even in a negative sense, listening to some of the music, you just take it and it's building people to lose themselves in their not knowing their identity, not having an education. You can make some bad choices. And so one, we need economics. One, we need the economic stimulus. We need the resources. But two, we also need the education to know what to do with the money. And so it's parallel of both.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this lesson throughout history, haven't we? Because there are so many people who've come from poor backgrounds. And again, that's regardless of any possible thing. They've just been people who come from poor backgrounds. And you see that they've made it big in football, whether that's the American code of football or soccer in the UK. And so many of them have ended up throwing the money away because they just did not know how to deal with it. At the same time, there's some fantastic role models, by the way. I think there's a guy called Marcus Rashford. I'm probably shocking my audience now by knowing a contemporary footballer, but he's done a great deal of work about poverty in the UK, particularly with school children, which is absolutely phenomenal. And he seems to be a wise steward of his cash. You struck me as some quite quite fascinating pointers about, trying to get that stimulus to people. And certainly one of the things that came out of the Peterborough bond, which I'm sure you've read about, but in the UK, when they did the social impact bond, one of the driving statistics there, which I found staggering, was that in the United Kingdom, 50% of people leaving incarceration have nobody to meet them. So they walk out the door and then they just try and find essentially anybody, and they instantly are going back to their old way. And I mean, there was an incredible statistic where in the Peterborough experiment, I mean, effectively, as long as you had somebody to meet somebody as they walked out of jail, you could actually take them around the corner and you could get them signed on for benefits and things like this and get them started, get people trying to be redeemed into society. Now, that's not as coherent as your fascinating strategy, but it's very, very sanguine that so much money goes in, because let's face it, the thing I've got against prison, full stop, is not only the fact that it destroys people's lives and ultimately doesn't necessarily make people less likely to offend, it just costs so much money. I mean, we waste so many resources that could be rebuilding New Orleans and places like that. Now, on that topic, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox because I'm supposed to be letting you talk this evening, Patrick, not this Patrick talking all the time. Peter Secon is asking, what key solutions is the New Orleans City Council working on to help make the city safer? How big is the challenge of budget and recruitment of police to support crime?
So that's the great question, Peter. So first, I would say this initiative that I run, being the director of gun violence prevention, it began actually with our mayor. She's the first female mayor in the history of the city. And she's taken on a lot of bold challenges to say, we're not just going to pass the problems from one administration to the next administration. We have to figure out what's happening and why it's happening. And that's been the problem. In 1996, they passed what was called the Dickey Amendment, which didn't allow federal gun research in the country. So until 2021, there's no federal research on what is causing gun violence in the country. So for New Orleans, if you think about pre-Katrina, post-Katrina, and even like before COVID, there's no studies or data to show what's causing the violence. And so the main thing right now is investing into the data and the policy to really study, one, what's causing it, so we can really attack it and provide the interventions and preventions that are needed so that we can make the city safer. We can't just incarcerate people without actually testing, well, what's causing them to be violent to begin with. It's like if your house is infested with mice and you just put all the mice in the cage, they're still going to come back because you haven't figured out what's drawing them to your house or what's going on. And once you figure out what's going on, you can prevent them from coming back again. The biggest challenge, though, with the police is, we had a situation with racist situations with the police department, police violence against citizens, especially people of color. You have a distrust in the police, and the police right now have to rebuild their trust in the community. Some police have left the force. I know in New Orleans, we've lost over 600 police officers. And so across the country, on top of that, dealing with the mental stresses of dealing with a pandemic, dealing with some of these economic losses, domestic violence is up 300%. Violence across the country is up. It's people who are in their feelings, and psychologists says that violence is just a reaction of people's inability to handle their emotions. And so if you don't know how to control your emotions and your feelings, you're going to react violently. On top of, you don't have the proper education and understanding of how to really talk through your feelings, it can create a volatile situation. I think it's all those things in combination that's just making a wildfire spread throughout our communities. It's important that we come together as a community. I tell people we can't have peace if we're working in pieces. We have to unify our efforts the same way we did against COVID. We have to look at violence as a virus and what interventions can we put in place to where we all, can really address this violence that's spreading across the community. So it's not just the city council, it's not just the police, it's not just the mayor, it's all of the city, really not just locally, but statewide and even nationally, internationally, because violence shouldn't happen anywhere. The same thing that we're seeing in Ukraine, it shouldn't be accepted. It's wrong. And so we have to find a way to stop this spread of violence, whether it's in New Orleans, whether it's in your community, or whether it's around the world. And it's only going to start if we say enough is enough.
Thank you, Patrick. Brilliant answers altogether. This is a really, really inspiring show altogether. We've got a multiplicity of questions here. I think some of them you've probably addressed as we go on. Let me also just say good evening to Ian Bonsor in the UK. Evening all. Sorry I'm late. Well, you're going to be able to watch this show on a repeat as soon as possible. But Ian, please give us a like. I can do my bad K-pop impersonation of a heart there just in order to embarrass the younger generation. Give us a few likes here, because if nothing else, that gets this message higher up the search engines. If we get this message higher up the search engines, that enables Patrick and his team to go out there and produce not just more books and sell books, but also get the message across about how we can make a better society for everybody, including those who have been the participants in the federal justice system in the United States of America or jailed elsewhere. John T is asking us a question, Patrick. Do you run a mentor scheme? And if so, how successful is it in preventing reoffending?
So with the SharpMen, we do a lot of mentoring in Sharp. What we've seen though too is that your likelihood after employment, it reduces your ability to reoffend. So helping those 890 individuals get employed in those 3 years, we saw less than a 10% recidivism. Even right now, a project I run called CEO, it's a Center for Employment Opportunities underneath the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. We had 175 individuals complete the program last year. Only 2 people reoffended. And so the main thing is that we have to find people to give access to resources and capital. In any society, any situation, when people are working and they're providing for their families, the last thing they want to do is lose that situation, especially if you made a mistake. You don't want to make that same mistake again. But if you're getting denied over and over and over and told no, 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 desperation kicks in. And so we have to remove that desperation and develop opportunities. And so for me, that's what I find, giving people opportunities, actually proving it, helping them get employed, and then now knowing what to do with your money. Hopefully we can have a greater return on investment.
Removing desperation and showing opportunity, that really is quite a message altogether. And actually that perhaps links in elegantly, Patrick, with a question we've got here from Mrs. Beata Young, the brilliant one. I remember Gunnar Stephenson. He was an excellent guest on Beata's PhD a number of months ago, visiting a prison in Kenya with his Education in a Suitcase project. What could entrepreneurs or startups do for former inmates or indeed current inmates that would be beneficial to society and the economy going forward?
I think having, again, the main thing is having access, talk to banking and financial institutions. The main thing is having access to real capital, real money. You're going to need housing. And so in order for me to get housing, though, I may have to get a loan. If there are projects and programs that startups can do that really just give people a pathway to get access to those funding, it's going to be critical. Transportation, even if you want to go back to school, again, there are costs associated with that. But if the banks are saying, no, we're not going to give you any money because of your conviction, then that has to stop. In the same vein that so my book hopefully will be the curriculum for institutions or inmates, people. For one, here's the plan, here's the education, but now we just need a bank or financial institutions to sign on and say, here is the pathway. You can start your account, you can begin your savings, you can work on your credit. And then from there, you'll be able to start seeing your money work. You can have stable housing, and then you can talk about how you can start your own business, invest in different companies, and get into some of these future markets that we normally talk on here. But if we can't get past go, and we're just stuck in our seats, it's hard to compete and it's hard to play this game.
It's a very, very powerful message indeed, Patrick. And actually, just want to throw in a quick question to you here before we start to round up. But actually, Interesting one from Chris Messina. And obviously, as the director for the Office of Gun Violence and therefore trying to protect and assist the mayor in protecting the citizens, what are your thoughts on private legal gun ownership in New Orleans?
We have to just be smart and safe and responsible. Having the weapon comes with a great accountability and responsibility. Many times people haven't taken safety courses, not only just how to use the gun, but how to store the gun properly. I believe in the city, with the amount of people that we have in, we can have gun-free zones. So our Superdome, which hosts the Saints, we haven't had a shooting in the Superdome. Why? Because it's a gun-free zone. You can't have weapons in there. In the same way, around schools, we have drug-free zones where drugs aren't used. Throughout the city, we can have those gun-free zones. It's not going to take your liberty away that you can be a gun owner and have your Second Amendment right. It's just that some places guns shouldn't be allowed. And so we have to find a balance on when protecting your property and yourself versus is it a threat to the community? And so just being smart and safe.
That's a very simple and logical answer for people to be responsible who've been allowed to manage to have this together. Thank you very much, Robert Brown. It's great to hear from you this evening, saying refreshing subject matter, much appreciated. So we've had this fabulous conversation, Patrick, and you know what? I hope it's just the first of many that we're going to have here, because actually we have been overwhelmed with questions this evening. It's been spectacular altogether. There's one key question I've got to ask you, though. What do you think? Where does the revolution, the capital market revolution, go next?
So again, first, it's been great to be here. I look forward to doing this again. There's a lot of stuff we can also talk about, and I'll be interested to get your opinion on. But the capital market revolution, I think honestly, it collapses. What I find in living in New Orleans, we deal with a lot of hurricanes. And so the weather really takes away your ability to have access to some power and some technology. So if we lose access to technology and power, then power is going to become the next revolution. So I believe that there's going to be a system of power banking where people are exchanging currency through power, whether it's needing, to charge your lights or to charge your car as we get into electric cars, when we get into needing access to Wi-Fi. It is really important that we look at the system of power banking. And so I think the people that controls power in the same way that people control gas, it's going to be serious. And so if we look at how gas prices are rising and how people are doing with the gas, just imagine once we become fully dependent on electrical things. So I think the next revolution is how much power you have is going to determine how much wealth you have.
Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I want you to do what Patrick tells you to do. Look sharp, think sharp, stay sharp. We're going to be taking a weekend off for Easter next week. We'll be back in 2 weeks with Richard Cotton. He's the boss of the Canadian National Stock Exchange, CSE, from SMEs to Cannabis Power Player. But in the meantime, I want you all to go out and do me a favor. Go buy a copy of this book, A Way Up, Economic Development and How That Can Manage to Work Post-Incarceration. This has been an absolutely incredible show with my namesake, Patrick Young. It's been so interesting from start to finish. Upgrade yourself. Be yourself. The positivity, ladies and gentlemen, is incredible. And I don't know how you do it, Patrick, because I've got to tell you, if I'd spent probably 1 hour in incarceration, my nickname would have been Wimpy Patrick, and I would have probably been the whipping boy for the entirety of the prison. You inspire us incredibly. I hope your book goes from strength to strength, because I hope your message goes from strength to strength of keeping people sharp and going forward and managing to develop what goes on. Thank you, John T., Ian Miller, Peter Second, Simon Huckle, Marcus Ward, Women on It, Chris Messina, Romby, Ian Bonsor, Beata Young, Robert Brown, Les Calvert, and all the team who've brought this to you this evening. Thank you very, very much. Marianne, Napoli, and Jeanette.